know Ryan from the Inkscape Vectors team. He is an amazing, multi-talented, creative, open source individual. He also runs his own design firm called Freehive, and he's going to talk a little bit about the market and freelancing using open source tooling. So take it away, Ryan.
Hi, everyone. Glad to meet you. I'm glad to be here. Pardon me if I look off the screen because I poorly situated my cameras, so my information's off to the side. But okay, in the chat, there's a little survey. So if I'm going to show part of my presentation as a video, but if you get bored with it, go to that survey. That has some questions that I've been asked quite a number of times over the years as I've presented on similar subjects. And I'll address at least the top 3 of those. But if you have your own other questions, feel free to chime in towards the end because I might have a hard time following the questions during the video. Anyhow, with that introduction, let me pull up this presentation that I put together as kind of an introduction. So maybe you're looking to start a career as a freelancer. Perhaps you have an interest in photography or design, illustration, animation that you want to turn into a part-time or a full-time job, but you don't know where to start, what tools to use. Maybe you're already a creative professional and using all the usual commercial software, but you're thinking about setting off on your own and you're not sure you want to take on a big subscription before you have clients. Maybe you're just fed up with subscriptions altogether. You're tired of the big corporations squeezing as much money out of you as possible, but not really giving you the kind of return that you would expect for what you're paying. Or maybe you just want to use software that's better for the world, that makes the world a better place by being freely available to anybody for any reason. I don't know what the reason is that you're here, but I'm hoping to show you that free and open source software, as opposed to commercial software, is viable and also in a lot of ways preferable for you in your freelance journey. But before we look at how Freehive uses free and open source software and how you can too, let's get a little bit of vocabulary out of the way. When I say free software, I'm not talking strictly about software that's free of charge. I'm talking about software that's freely licensed. And what it means to be freely licensed is that the creator of that software gives you the right to use, to modify, and redistribute the code of that software. You can see the code, and you can do things with it without having to get their permission. Sometimes I'll call it free and open source software for clarity. Free software may be made available free of charge, but what truly makes it free is that it gives its users freedom. If a developer were to lose interest in the software, or some giant corporation came and bought the developers all out and told them to make the software do something different, the software as it was created is still available to the community of users that are using it to keep working on it or to take it in a different direction. In a sense, the software belongs to the community, not just to the people who created it, because they licensed it in that way, in a free way. Valuable tools don't die because their commercial value dies. A company can't just buy the software and then discontinue it so that you have to use their competing product or end up on some kind of subscription. software that's made available to you free of charge, but without these other benefits, isn't really making you free, it's making you dependent at a discount. Let's get into the fun part and look at some actual projects created by Freehive using free and open source software, and talk about those tools and how those tools might fit into your freelance career. Frame 1 is the creator of a specialty controller that's used in the competitive gaming market. They came to Freehive while the product was still in early stages of development, with the need for a video that would help them pre-sell it. The video you just watched was the finished result, but let's look at how this came together and what tools we used. When we start a project like this, we'll often begin with sketches in an application called Krita. Krita is backed by a nonprofit foundation that receives funding from user donations as well as corporate sponsors. It's a powerful digital painting application that is available for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. The reason we start with Krita is that we can get ideas sketched roughly and start to show the client what we have in mind in a way that's loose and easy to change if we need to. In this case, we did sketching in Krita. We take those sketches and stitch them together into an animated storyboard in another free software application called Blender. Here you can see the Blender interface and the sketches we cut to the specific music track we had in mind. Blender does more than this. Its native capability is creating 3D renderings and animations. Once we've arrived at a concept that the client likes, we'll import the product model or create it from scratch, all in Blender. If you're not familiar with Blender, this probably looks really complicated. Blender does take some time to master, but the wonderful thing about it and other free software is that you don't have to be in a hurry. You're not paying hundreds of dollars per month to use it. You can start incorporating it into your work in a basic way and learn the software as you go. Blender was the first free software application we incorporated into our own work about 11 years ago, and you'll see that it has become a staple tool of the work we do. Blender's available also, like Krita, for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. So let's take a look at another project. Elementary creates the Windows and Mac OS alternative called Elementary OS. This is a web page design and set of renderings we created for them as they were looking to more deliberately promote its new partnership with a hardware vendor. But before I get into how we design the page, I'm going to jump back in time and look at a small detail to showcase another important free software application. What you're looking at is the desktop background we created for Elementary OS within the GNU image manipulation program, more commonly known as GIMP. GIMP will bear a lot of similarities to photo editing software you'll find elsewhere, with many of the same features, including layers, filters, and so forth. What you're looking at is a slightly modified photograph for the daytime background, and here is a heavily modified version of that same photograph for the nighttime background. While the workflow may be slightly different than other programs when it comes to photo editing, there's not much you can't create with GIMP. It is community funded and user developed and available on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Now, back to the web page design itself. Once again, we're looking at Krita, this time being used to wireframe the page prior to work on 3D rendering and other assets. Krita is a much more powerful tool than we're using it for here. But with fantastic drawing tablet support, it's a fun starting point for expressing ideas. With buy-in on the page concept, we started to work on the assets for the page. The first and most important for capturing attention and telling a story was the hero animation. Blender delivers for us again here. Starting with the CAD drawings for the actual laptop, we're able to create the material look and rig setup we need. Then we edit the screen recordings the way we want them right inside of Blender and pull it all together. In parallel to the animation and renderings, we worked on a refined page design using a free software application called Inkscape. Inkscape is a community-developed free software application for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. While its original purpose was to serve as a vector drawing application, and we use it for that all the time, we also use it to lay out pages for websites and sometimes even for print. Here you can see the layout and the light and dark modes in preparation for a handoff to the web developer. This page design has not yet been built, but it serves as a great example of how a suite of free software applications can all come together to create something new and exciting. Now, let's change gears and look at something designed for print. Gate Labs is the creator of the Gate Smart Lock. As part of a broader brand revamp, Freehive was involved in the redesign of their retail packaging. Here you can see what that packaging looks like in the free software application called Scribus. Scribus is a desktop publishing tool created by volunteers and available for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, like the other free software I've highlighted. If you're designing large multi-page documents or need to export a PDF for print with spot or CMYK colors, it is the best free software solution available. In this case, it was used as the gathering place for several elements created in other applications. On the front, you can see a rendering of the lock alongside a mobile phone. The rendering was done in Blender, of course, but the app interface was redesigned by Freehive using Inkscape. The side of the packaging features several icons created in Inkscape as well. See that image of the woman with her dog and the lock on the door behind her? That's actually a stock photo combined with a product rendering made in Blender. Once this project was completed, exported as a PDF, and sent to the printer, it was done. No one asked what software it was created in, and no one cared. While there are perhaps scenarios where a client may require work to be done in a particular application, or they may need the source files for some reason. This has come up very rarely in our work done exclusively in free software for over 5 years. If the finished results are good, little else matters to clients. These projects have highlighted the creative software we use most, but there's a lot more creative software that's available and freely licensed for you to use in your freelance career. There's an application called PenPot that works great for collaborative prototyping. There's Kdenlive, which is a powerful video editor. There's Darktable for raw image processing, and there are many others that are available and freely licensed. If you choose to pursue a career as a freelancer, an investment learning free software applications is an investment in your freedom. It's insurance against being caught in the crossfire between competing software companies trying to lock you into just using their product. It is protection against losing access to your own work unless you continue to pay a subscription for the rest of your life. Most importantly, it's an opportunity to join with designers, artists, photographers, and other creators banding together in communities to shape their own future. That was something I put together. I found myself doing the same-ish presentation a lot, and I discovered I also, when I watch my own presentations, I hum and haw and I do things too slowly. So you got basically a 45-minute presentation in 15 minutes without all of the dead space of my normal presentations. But that being said, the top voted question right now is, how do you deal with incompatible files when collaborating with other designers? And I wish I hadn't put that on there because I don't know that I have a fantastic solution to that problem. But I will say this, it has come up a lot less commonly than you might think. And it's really going to depend on what kind of work you're doing. So more often than not, when I'm collaborating with anyone, it's in a print application, and I'll just export things as a PDF, and they can open PDFs. So I don't have a great answer. It is a problem, and I think it's one of the reasons why freelancing is maybe a better space for free and open source software, at least in the short term, until we work out some of the other bugs. The second most asked question is, how do I convince my school to teach free and open source software? So I think that it might be challenging if you're in an upper education or even in the United States high school, when somebody's already a teenager. At least the school system in the United States is very heavily geared towards getting people into jobs. And the perception is that to get them jobs, they need to know Adobe, or primarily Adobe software. That's kind of true, but for all the wrong reasons. What I would really suggest is elementary school is the place to encourage more use of these tools. Part of the reason we're in this conundrum where people are teaching Adobe software is because it's a chicken and egg problem. The schools teach it because the businesses use it, And businesses use it in part because schools teach it. So I think to short circuit that, we have to jump in earlier. And obviously, there are other reasons you can convince somebody to let you use it. It's free. And a lot of schools have funding issues. So without a ton of time, I'll leave it at that. Shouldn't I just use the tool that finishes the job the fastest? I love this question because it brings up something that I think is a big misconception, maybe earlier in your career. I'm an old man now, and and I've discovered that you're going to have to learn to use a lot of different software over your career. Things will go away. Things will change a lot. A part of the reason people are faster in a particular application is because they've used it a lot. And there's this awkward transition that when you're maybe going from Photoshop to using GIMP or Illustrator and you're trying to use Scribus and Inkscape, there will be a period where you're not going to be as efficient, but that's all I use anymore. And I don't feel like I'm slow. I haven't had a client ever complain to me about how fast I'm able to do things. So I think it's maybe a question that is circumvented just by experience. Okay, what about your favorite feature that your open source tool lacks? That's kind of in the same vein as the first question. Again, because I'm an old man, I was using Photoshop in like the mid 90s, and GIMP gets a lot of, I don't know why it attracts so much negativity, but when I use it, it's basically like using Photoshop from 10 years ago. There's nothing I can't do in it. I might have to adjust my workflow a little bit, but functionally, it does what I need to do. It might miss some little whiz-bang feature. Again, I would just say, give it a chance, be flexible in your workflow, and just try new ways to do things, and you'll discover there's really not much you can't do with free and open source software. Let me shift over, and I'm sorry I can't get through all these questions. Let me shift over to see if there are any other questions that you guys dropped in the feed here.
I dropped one in there, Ryan. Where do you source the music for your videos? Are they open license, or do you have thoughts on sourcing music generally?
I haven't found a great repository for openly licensed music yet. If you know of any, I would love to see it. You know, if you have some links, drop them in the chat. I tend to license it through the usual suspects. It is a downside to some of what I'm doing. Now, this video in particular, I couldn't release it in an open license anyway because it's got client work in there that's copyrighted. So, but yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. How do you collaborate remotely using free and open source software? There's two tools that you should be familiar with, and you might already be, depending on who's watching this. One is Nextcloud. It is fantastic. So Nextcloud is going to be basically the equivalent of a number of tools, but instead of Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever, this free and open source tool is probably the most accessible if you're collaborating with multiple people. It doesn't require a lot of new ways of thinking about how to collaborate, because most people have used Dropbox or Box or something like it. So it functions like those. As far as hosting, I'm going to plug Cloudron. They were open source and then they weren't, but it's a good tool and it's a reasonable price, and it's built on a lot of open source technology. It's basically a tool that allows you to install Docker containers on a stock Ubuntu server. And it's really cool because it basically has one-click install for Nextcloud and a bunch of other tools. So if you want to self-host and you're not a network administrator, but you can follow simple instructions, this is a good solution. And I think it is free if you have just 2 apps. Another tool that I use more now than I did originally, because it doesn't require any cloud infrastructure, something called SyncThing. It is a little bit more difficult to pick up how it works. It's kind of more like a torrent. If you've used Resilio Sync or something like that, I think that's the closest kind of commercial equivalent. But what this allows you to do is basically allocate folders that are synchronized across machines. This can be really good for collaboration if you're working with somebody that's willing to learn something a little bit different. But the nice thing is, whereas in Nextcloud, you're kind of moving your files up to the cloud, and you have to have cloud storage for that, and then you're syncing it down somewhere. In this case, you're syncing from peer to peer. And so you don't have to have any server anywhere to sync your project folders and so on. So that's kind of how I'd answer that question. Somebody asked if I have any favorite plugins for GIMP or Inkscape. I don't. I'll be honest, I am not very good at these tools. And I'm always insecure when I show my work, because I'm probably doing it in some ridiculous way, and somebody that's actually good at them will look at it and say, why did you do it this way? But I don't. I generally use the stock tools, and even at that, I probably only use maybe 10 or 15% of the potential of these tools. So I wish I had some recommendations, but I don't really. Let's see. What should freelancers do to contribute to the development of their tools? Funding, art, bug reporting. Okay, good question. I didn't bring that up a lot in the video. So what should you do? One of the questions on the list, I don't know if we'll get to it, but I'll answer it in conjunction with this. Shouldn't I be worried about these free software applications going away? Somebody mentioned Natron, or sorry to my francophones that know how that's supposed to be pronounced, but I think it's a good example of a free software application that had a lot of promise and then has gone through periods of basically not having anybody to maintain it. What should you do to prevent that, right? We talk a lot about how Adobe or whoever can raise their prices a lot and kind of push you out of being able to use it, or it happens that they discontinue software. Somebody will buy out, a competitor will buy out the tool that you use, and in kind of a roundabout way to acquire all the customers there, and then they'll kill it. So that happens a lot in commercial software. It can happen in free software. So what do you do to prevent it? You should get involved. I think I've been volunteering for Inkscape for a while, and you'd be surprised by how few people actually contribute to a lot of these applications, and how big of a difference you can have by getting involved and being willing to. I mean, you don't have to commit your whole life to it, but put in a few hours to help promote the tool, to provide feedback on an interface question. You have a lot of people engaging in these different software applications for different reasons, and they have different talents. And so you might have a really talented developer that's trying to understand, they're looking for a new problem to solve, and you can come in and help kind of provide some user perspective on that. It's probably worth a whole presentation on its own, and the results will vary by project, right? But I would say if you're using the free software, do what you can to get involved in at least one of the tools that you're passionate about. Like I said, for me, that's Inkscape. So you're always welcome to come around and at chat.inkscape.org, and we have a channel called Vectors, where it's for people that are working on promoting and improving Inkscape from a user perspective. But that's what I would do. And some projects you can donate money to, and that can help as well. But there are a lot of ways to contribute in that way. And I'll say this as kind of a parting note on that subject. I talked about how free software can go unmaintained, but the nice thing with free software, unlike maybe whatever commercial tool that you spend a lot of time learning, it's always there to be picked back up again. And I think, I'm not trying to pick on Natron or anything, but it has been picked up again and seen continued development. So unlike your favorite commercial tool, when it dies, it's gone. There's no bringing it back. But some of these free software applications will see these revivals. And if you learn the history of some of these applications, they have already gone through multiple revivals. So there is some insurance there, and I wouldn't worry a lot about it, but I would get involved. Okay, I'm talking too much there. You might have seen my profile picture had me with hair, and you've been disappointed to find out I don't have hair. I'm not Bob Ross, but I did, in the spirit of the time, I went to AI to find out a little bit about Bob Ross if he was a cyborg. So these are some images just as a wrapper for everyone to enjoy. These are Bob Ross as a cyborg, not evil. So here you go. Here's one of my favorites. We've got we've got some more here. We've got, for some reason, the AI liked to make 2 Bob Rosses in every image. Anyhow, here you go. Bob Ross as a cyborg, not evil. Definitely not evil here. So
we have 2 more from the live audience. The first one is, what about the typography? Do you think it's worth licensing it for projects?
this will reveal some of my unsophistication. I tend to use Google Fonts, which is a great repository for a lot of openly licensed typography, and there are other sources. I came up into design through architecture. So one of the areas where maybe my skill set lacks compared to somebody that came up through art or graphic design, I don't know much about typography. So I have licensed it in the past. I don't like licensing it. I don't like dealing with that, remembering which software was licensed where and what the terms of that software are and how many computers it can be installed on. I just don't want to touch it anymore. So I don't tend to do that much.
Okay, another live question we have is, which do you think is the bigger hurdle to FOSS adoption? People not knowing that these tools exist, or people knowing about the tools but thinking they're not as good as the proprietary options?
It is both. So there is surprisingly a lack of understanding about what these tools are and that they exist. I think in our little worlds, we think a lot of people know about them, but in the broader world, they don't. But there is a negative perception about a lot of these tools. And that's one of the reasons I spend time doing these applications. I don't do these presentations to promote Freehive, to get new business. It happens once in a while, but it's not really the reason I'm doing it. The reason I'm doing it is because I want to prove to people that they're wrong. I mean, I'm not presenting the best work in the world, but nobody's going to look at anything that I presented in this or anywhere other setting and go, well, gee, that looks like it was made with amateur software, right? It doesn't, because it doesn't matter. These tools can do it. If you learn the tools and you have the skills and you apply the time to learn them, you can produce whatever you could in some other tool here. So that's why I do that. As far as how that affects adoption, I'm trying to solve that from both angles, right? So Inkscape, we're trying to think about how we get the word out more to people, and through Freehive, I'm trying to show that, hey, look, little did you know, like, this cool video was just done with these tools that you were trashing on. And like I said, everyone likes to criticize GIMP, but like, I got no problems with GIMP. Like, it works. And anyhow, hopefully that answers the question. Should I give my client source files? That's an interesting question. I've met people that make an argument that using free and open source software actually makes that a more compelling selling point. I've never used that as a selling point. I discovered when I was first freelancing that I had certain clients that would hire me to do the work, and then they'd say, well, now I want the source files, and then they would butcher my work. and that kind of hurt my feelings more. And I kind of started saying I wouldn't do it. Maybe I learned 2 things. I learned, one, that the kind of client that wants to do that is probably not a good client anyway, and for various reasons, but they're the kind of client that's going to want the most from you for the least amount of money, and probably not the kind of client that you need to worry about keeping in the long term. It's not going to work out. And the second thing is, I don't have as much ego to protect. I guess I got over this idea that any one project I work on would be the summation of all my grandeur as a designer. because over time you just learn that there are no projects where you have an infinite amount of freedom and nothing ever turns out perfectly. You could always spend more time on any project. So there's a measure of my accomplishment, which whether that even matters or not is a great question. But if there was a measure of that, it will be the sum of everything I've done and not any one thing. So if people want the files, whatever, you can have the file, figure it out. Why not just use free or non-subscription software? Yeah, so this is a question that comes up a lot too. So Affinity, to my knowledge so far, is not doing subscription. There's DaVinci Resolve, which a lot of people really like. There's one I think called Gravit, which is some free cloud-based vector drawing tool. I don't know, if you want to use those, go ahead. My feeling with those is that most things that are free aren't free forever. And if I'm going to invest my time in learning something and kind of overcoming those productivity barriers, because there's always kind of a break-in period, I would rather do that on a tool that I don't have to worry about going away or becoming something I have to subscribe to in 3 years. And most of those tools are also owned by companies that are purchasable. So, I mean, DaVinci Resolve, I think, is a great example. I think Blackmagic Design is the company that produces that. But, you know, Blackmagic Design in the grand scheme of things is small fries to a company like Autodesk. And if Autodesk decides one day that they want to compete a little bit better in that space, you know, what's a $1 billion acquisition to Autodesk? So you might like the people and they might have good values and be providing it for free, but if it's not licensed freely, there's no real guarantee in the end. So that's why I tend to suggest, just if you're learning a new tool, if budget's an issue, try something that's freely licensed. How do I convince more designers to use free and open source software? It is actually really hard. One of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing is I think if you show people that you can achieve fantastic results, it breaks down a lot of barriers and creates a lot of curiosity. And there are people presenting at this conference that are just like way cooler and doing way cooler stuff than me. And you can point to what they're doing, and that speaks a lot more to a designer than some of the moralistic arguments. I think once they see that they can actually achieve great things, and then you can follow up by saying, hey, you know, you don't have to pay $55 a month or whatever. You know, you can start speaking about those other values. When you support free and open source software, you're actually supporting the world, right? You're helping yourself. By helping yourself, you're helping the world. By helping create a tool that you use and making that tool better, you're making the world better for everybody. So that's kind of where I go with that.
The people are coming up with ideas for like an online, FOSS created design sharing system using something like PixelFed. Like there's all sorts of discussion, like it's very active. But this question is from Seth, and it's, do you use Blender for video editing? And if so, how's the effect workflow compared to a traditional video editing or effects application? When I was using it, which was pre 3.0, I found that Blender's video editing was clearly intended as a last step in the pipeline, and that going back for color correction or adding in effects was often difficult.
Yeah, I think I have done more video editing in the past than I do now. Most of my video editing now is really like the stuff you saw, product animations, things, and short video clips. So for that kind of work, Blender's fine. Where, you know, it doesn't support LUTs, which are basically color profiles that help your camera video output to look better. And to me, that's like the most painful part of using Blender for any video editing, because color correction is challenging. I found it challenging. There might be a better way to do it. And like I'll throw my caveat in here that I did earlier. I'm not very good at these things. So there's probably some fantastic way that I don't know. But Blender is an okay video editor. Kdenlive is, I think, a much better solution. And there's some others. Olive is one that's been kind of looking promising. And then you have like OpenShot and some others that are out there. I think Kdenlive right now is probably the most feature-rich tool. The reason I end up going back to Blender, and this is not a dig at the Kdenlive folks, but I've had a really hard time setting up an environment where Kdenlive was stable. And when you're using an application for a large project, stability is a big deal. You don't want your files to end up corrupted. when you're splicing like 5 hours of raw video together. That being said, a lot of people have great results. So if you're doing video editing, pick the brains of those people that are in it. I would suggest just using the distro they use, using the package in whatever format works well. And sometimes it may even be a choice of what video card you use, whether you're using AMD video cards or NVIDIA, but find a kind of that stable working environment, and if that's a big part of your workflow. But for little stuff like I do, Blender's okay, but it's not great. I wish there was a little bit more focus there, but it works. I don't know if that answered. Any other questions?
I don't see any more live questions coming in, so.
Yeah, I think these are a little bit spread out. So I would just say this is kind of a final plug. I got into this. I'm passionate about this because when I was in high school, again, I don't know what overseas. When I was in my teenage years, whatever you call it, I had an art teacher, and this was in the 90s, so back before when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But I didn't come from like a lot of money. My parents both worked. It was just kind of a working class household. I had a lot compared to other people, but we didn't have access to a ton of things. So my art teacher spent his own money to buy a license of Adobe Photoshop, and he installed it on the computer in our art studio that was for grading. And just kind of this cheap computer. And because I had access to that back then, I didn't realize how big of an influence that would have over my entire life. Just having that access to a software application I can play with and learn with. And that only happened because I had an art teacher that it was important enough to him that he invested that money into it. To me, open source software, the reason I still stick with it and the reason I continue to try to make the time to talk about it is because there are kids like that all over the world. And I think the world is just a better place with them involved and engaged. I hate to think that some fantastic artist in any country in the world that you could name never became that artist because they couldn't afford a $55 a month license, or their school couldn't afford whatever the licensing fee was to use those tools. So to me, I think what drives me today is really that idea, that vision of that person that was me, but somewhere else, who I'd like to give a chance to become and have a fulfilling life, a creative life, and to contribute in a meaningful way through their talents. And so that I'll end with that. That's really, I think, where all of this comes together for me is the free software arguments about feature or this feature or that feature, whether it's buggy or not, and so forth. What it really comes down to is I think it's one of the best vehicles in the world to lift people out of poverty and to create a more creative and beautiful world. You can see my contact info if you want to reach out to me. I'm on Mastodon, and I'm also on Twitter, but I don't really follow it as much lately. And then you can reach out to me through email. If you just want to go to my Freehive website, you can send me an email there too. So thanks, everyone. I appreciate you giving me the time.
That was a beautiful way to close your talk. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Yeah, glad to be here.